Ladies and gentlemen, beloved, listen to me carefully. If you only knew what happens when a soul truly prays, if you only saw just once what heaven releases when one person kneels in secret and cries, "Not my will but yours be done," you would never underestimate prayer again. This is not a speech. This is a divine invitation, because you are about to discover why some hearts burn with such irresistible fire for Jesus. Why multitudes gather round one humble soul who knows how to touch the throne of grace. You are about to learn the secret behind every true spiritual awakening, and why the power that flows from prayer isn't just for the mighty, it's for you. So stay with me. Don't just watch. Let your spirit drink this truth. Prayer is not noise. It's not a checklist. It's not a religious duty. Prayer's presence. The hidden power is not in what you say. It's in who shows up when you say it with your whole heart. When you enter your quiet place, heaven takes attendance. And when you truly surrender, oh beloved, something begins to move in the spirit realm. Angels listen. Chains begin to shake. And above all, the heart of the Father leans in. Why do the multitudes come? Not because of charisma, not because of theology, but because prayer ignites a fire in the soul, and people, even those far from God, are drawn to the flame. There is something different about a person who prays. A weight of fragrance, an authority. They speak few words, but the words cut through noise and hit the heart. This is why the early church shook cities, not through loud declarations, but through deep supplication. You see, the hidden power in prayer isn't just for healing the sick or parting the seas. It's the power to love like Jesus. When you pray long enough, you start to feel his heartbeat. You begin to weep over what he weeps over. You begin to see the multitudes not as crowds, but as souls. And that compassion is what truly draws people to Jesus. Love born in the prayer closet flows in power in the streets. So I ask you, have you truly prayed? Have you touched God? Because when you do, the atmosphere around you changes. Your room becomes a sanctuary. Your voice becomes a vessel. And your life becomes a magnet for the presence of God. You won't need to chase people. They will come, not to you, but to the Jesus they see in you. Prayer is not just a ritual. It's a divine encounter. It is the sacred place where humanity meets divinity, where flesh is humbled and spirit ascends. Prayer is not for the faint of heart or the passive. It is the lifeline for the desperate, the broken, the yearning. When you understand what prayer truly is, you will no longer see it as a routine or obligation, but as a holy doorway that opens heaven onto the earth. It is one thing to speak about God. It is another to speak to God. And it is entirely something different to be in his presence, where words fall away and the heart takes over. This is the mystery of prayer. It defies the mind and touches the soul. It reaches past intellect and dives deep into intimacy. Every true encounter with God begins in that hidden place where the soul whispers, "Here I am." You must understand, multitudes are not drawn to crowds, to sound, to personalities, or even to eloquence. They are drawn to presence. They are drawn to something their spirit cannot explain but desperately craves. And that presence, that fragrance of heaven, only rests on those who have been with God in secret. That is the hidden power of prayer. Prayer is not a method to get what we want from God. It is a divine channel through which we receive what He wants to give us. We do not manipulate heaven with long speeches. We do not persuade God with repetition. The true power of prayer lies in the surrender it requires. It is not your voice that shakes the heavens. It is your heart's posture. God is not listening for beautiful words. He is listening for truth, for honesty, for desperation, for faith. When a person prays, not with formality, but with fire, they become a living altar. And where there is fire on the altar, the glory of God falls. This is why some can speak 1,000 words and change nothing, while another can whisper one prayer and the atmosphere shifts, because heaven responds to authenticity. Heaven responds to faith. Do you wonder why some carry a presence that silences a room? Why their words cut through confusion and stir hearts to repentance and love? It is not their talent. It is not their volume. It is not their reputation. It is their prayer life. They have been alone with God. They have wept on the floor in silence. They have wrestled with doubt and still held on to faith. They have come through the fire of personal surrender, and now the fragrance of that encounter clings to them. Prayer opens you to the supernatural, not in spectacle but in reality. When you pray in spirit and in truth, things move in dimensions unseen. Angels are dispatched. Darkness trembles. Miracles are birthed. But more than that, your heart begins to reflect the heart of Jesus. You do not simply leave your quiet time feeling good. You leave changed. You walk differently. You speak with a different weight. People around you notice not because you told them you prayed, but because something eternal is now resting upon you. And it is that something which draws multitudes. People are drawn to the light in you that prayer has lit. They are drawn to the calm that cannot be shaken, the joy that cannot be explained, the compassion that pours out of your eyes. They are drawn to the invisible yet undeniable presence of God. This is why we must never treat prayer as casual. It is not something we do when we have time. It is the source of everything we do. Without prayer, ministry is performance. Without prayer, healing is mechanical. Without prayer, our words are hollow. But with prayer, true prayer, we become vessels that heaven can flow through. And when heaven flows through a life, crowds gather not because of the person, but because of the presence. God is still looking for those who will stand in the gap, those who will cry out in secret, those who will kneel when no one sees. The spotlight does not bring power. The secret place does. The secret place is where power is born, where revelation is given, where burdens are lifted. And when a person emerges from that place, the world cannot remain the same. So I ask you now, have you been in that place? Have you truly prayed? Have you quieted the noise of your life long enough to hear His voice? Because if you have, then you know what I speak of. And if you haven't, then this is your invitation. Do not settle for shallow living when deep waters await you. Do not live off of second-hand revelation when God longs to speak to you directly. Do not chase crowds when the secret place will draw them to you. There is power, real power, waiting for the one who will pray not just with lips, but with heart, with soul, with tears. Prayer is the meeting place of man's hunger and God's glory. It is the altar where the natural becomes supernatural. And when you live there, you won't need to ask why people are drawn to you. You'll know they are being drawn to Him through you. The true power of prayer lies in surrender, not in words. It is not the length of your prayer that moves the hand of God, but the depth of your yielded heart. It is not your ability to speak eloquently that stirs the heavens. It is your willingness to let go. The secret of all powerful prayer is not control, but release. Real prayer begins where your will ends. Many come to God thinking they must impress Him. They think He needs to hear a certain rhythm or a perfectly ordered phrase. But God is not impressed by vocabulary. He is not swayed by performance. He looks deeper into the very core of your spirit, and He listens for surrender. That gentle, broken whisper that says, God, I need you. I trust you. Take everything. True prayer doesn't begin until the ego dies, until pride is silenced, until the soul bows low and says, have your way, Lord. That is when the power comes. That is when the weight of heaven begins to rest on you. Not when you speak louder, but when you fall lower. There is something so sacred in the moment when a person stops striving. That is where God moves. That is where His presence comes in like a river, quiet, steady, unstoppable. You may have prayed many times before, but I ask you now, have you ever surrendered in your prayer? Have you ever come before God not with a list, but with an offering? Yourself. When you pray from a place of control, you pray from limitation. But when you surrender, you give God permission to do what only He can do. Surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is not defeat. It is the doorway to divine strength. It is in that act of letting go that you are filled with power, not your own. Consider this. A child does not need perfect speech to reach the heart of a loving parent. All it takes is the sound of sincerity, a tear, a reaching out. The parent rushes in not because of the child's words, but because of their heart. And so it is with our Father. He is not waiting for your perfection. He is waiting for your surrender. You may feel unworthy, inadequate, unsure. That's exactly when prayer becomes most powerful. When you come just as you are. Because surrender says, I cannot do this, but I know you can. Surrender says, I've tried and failed, but I know you never fail. Surrender opens the door for grace. And where grace flows, transformation begins. There is a silence in surrendered prayer that speaks louder than 1,000 shouts. It is in that stillness where your soul becomes aligned with His will. And when your will is aligned with His, your words carry weight. Not because you are trying to convince Him, but because you are in agreement with Him. That's when prayer becomes effortless, powerful, magnetic, not because you are praying harder, but because you are now praying with God, not just to Him. And that, beloved, is where multitudes are drawn, not to noise, not to display, but to the person who has been transformed by surrender. People can sense when a life has let go of the world and taken hold of the Spirit. There is a softness in your words, but a strength in your presence. You no longer try to prove anything. You just carry something. You carry peace. You carry clarity. You carry a light that does not burn out, because it is not fueled by your effort, but by your surrender. Do you know how powerful that is? To live surrendered is to live free. To pray surrendered is to pray without fear, because you no longer have to make things happen. You simply trust the one who can. You no longer pray out of panic. You pray out of peace. And peace is irresistible. People see it, they feel it, and they want it. That's what draws the multitudes. It's not the miracle itself, it's the surrendered heart behind it. It's not the stage, it's the secret place. It's not the personality, it's the posture. When people see someone who has truly laid everything down before God, they are seeing a glimpse of heaven on earth. They are drawn not to the person, but to the presence that surrender attracts. So today, if you feel weary in prayer, if you feel your words are falling flat, if you feel like you are pushing and striving with no response, pause and surrender. Let go. You were never meant to carry the weight of outcomes. You were meant to carry the posture of surrender. Whisper this in your heart. God, I give it all to you. Say it again. I give it all to you. That is where power begins. That is where peace floods in. That is where heaven leans close. And that is the hidden power in prayer that transforms a life, and through that life draws many to the love of Jesus. There is something supernatural that happens when the human spirit aligns with the heart of God in prayer. You may not see it with your eyes, but the unseen world begins to shift. Heaven responds. Prayer may seem quiet and still on the outside, but it carries the explosive power of resurrection on the inside. In that moment of communion between man and God, eternity touches time. The impossible becomes possible. Prayer is not just communication. It is transformation. Every time you pray with a sincere heart, something changes. Not always outside you, but always within you. You may walk into prayer weary, confused, burdened, but you leave lighter, clearer, more anchored in the truth of who God is. The power that flows through real prayer is not merely to change circumstances, but to prepare you to walk in the purpose for which you were born. There is a divine exchange that takes place in prayer. You bring your weakness and He gives you strength. You bring your fears and He gives you peace. You bring your questions and He gives you wisdom. And with each encounter, you are molded more and more into His image. Prayer is not just a spiritual practice. It is the very process through which heaven shapes you. What many fail to understand is that prayer is not only a request line. It is the workshop of transformation. And when you emerge from that inner sanctuary, you are no longer the same. You carry something you didn't have before. You walk with a confidence that doesn't come from pride, but from proximity. You've been near the throne of grace. You've stood in holy stillness and felt the hand of God press gently on your soul. It is that transformation, silent and visible but powerful, that begins to shine through your words, your actions, your very presence. People may not understand it, but they will feel it. Something about you feels different. You speak with authority, but not arrogance. You love deeply without demanding anything in return. You forgive quickly and you live lightly. These are the marks of one who has been changed by prayer. You see, this is what truly draws people to Christ. Not religious debate, not polished sermons, not grand displays. It is the quiet testimony of a transformed life. It is the power of a heart so touched by God that it becomes magnetic. You don't have to advertise that you've been with Him. Your life becomes the evidence. That is what prayer does. It makes you a witness not with words alone, but with presence. God does not call us to impress the world. He calls us to reflect Him. And we can only reflect what we have encountered. When prayer becomes your lifestyle, Transformation becomes your identity. You no longer strive to be holy. You become holy by proximity. You no longer chase miracles. They begin to follow you. You no longer worry about how to reach the multitudes. Your life begins to speak louder than any microphone ever could. People are not looking for perfection. They are hungry for authenticity. They want to see someone who walks with peace in the midst of chaos, who speaks with hope when things look dark, who stands firm when everything is shaking. That is the kind of strength that prayer births in you. That is the kind of light that shines from a soul that has been in the secret place. Let me tell you, when God transforms you in prayer, the people around you begin to change too. Your very presence becomes a testimony, not because you are trying to preach to them, but because the love of God begins to radiate from you. You smile differently. You listen deeply. You see the brokenness in others and respond with compassion, not judgment. You carry an atmosphere of heaven, and that atmosphere speaks louder than words. That is why we cannot treat prayer as optional. It is essential. It is not a checkbox in a daily routine. It is the very breath of our spirit. Without it, we live reactive lives. With it, we live responsive lives, guided not by pressure, but by purpose. And here's the beautiful thing. The more time you spend in true prayer, the more you realize it was never about asking for things. It was about becoming someone. Not someone the world shaped, but someone heaven envisioned. Prayer transforms you into that person, the one you were always meant to be. And when you become that person, people will come, not to you, but through you, to the one who changed you. They will be drawn not by charisma, but by character, not by your words, but by your walk. That is the hidden power of prayer. Its ability to shape a life so completely that others find the courage to seek God for themselves. So let prayer transform you. Let it go beyond requests and rise into surrender. Let it carve out of you the fear, the pride, the doubt, and replace them with peace, humility, and faith. And when that transformation is complete, or even still in progress, you will find that people are drawn, not because of what you say, but because of who you've become in the presence of God. When a person prays with a heart of faith, something divine begins to move, not just around them, but within them. Faith is not loud. It doesn't always shout or demand, but when it is present, it speaks louder than fear, doubt, or any circumstance. Prayer infused with faith creates a sacred environment, an atmosphere where miracles are not just possible, they become inevitable. This kind of faith doesn't come from reading about God. It comes from encountering Him. It is not something you work up emotionally. It's something born in the stillness of trust. It is the calm assurance that God is who He says He is, even when nothing in the natural makes sense. And when that kind of faith becomes the foundation of your prayer life, you become a vessel for the supernatural. Faithful prayer is not wishful thinking. It is not hoping something will happen. It is knowing that something already has. It's a deep inner confidence, not in your ability to pray, but in God's ability to respond. Even if the answer hasn't yet manifested, your heart rests because you know the one you're speaking to never fails. That quiet, steady faith becomes a beacon. Others notice. They're drawn to the strength in your stillness, the hope in your words, the light in your countenance. You may never preach a sermon, but your unwavering belief in prayer speaks volumes. You don't have to convince anyone that God is real. Your life begins to show it every time you bow your head in faith, even in silence. You're planting seeds in the invisible. And those seeds always grow. They may take time, but they never go to waste. Faith waters the ground, even when the skies look dry. It's not about the size of your faith, but the object of it. A mustard seed placed in the hands of the Almighty can move mountains. Prayer becomes powerful, not because of how loudly you believe, but because of who you believe in. That's what draws people. They sense the realness of your connection with God. They see that your faith is not shaken by delay or disappointment. They see that your joy is not dependent on outcomes, but rooted in something unshakable. You begin to carry an atmosphere of expectancy. When you pray, you're not pleading. You're preparing. You're preparing your heart, your mind, and your life for what God has already promised. That preparation is contagious. It stirs something in those around you. They begin to believe again. They begin to hope again, not because you pushed them, but because your faith quietly lifted them. Prayer with faith makes room for heaven to invade earth. It opens a door that no man can shut. And when you've walked through enough seasons, seen enough answered prayers, and endured enough valleys, your faith becomes tested, refined, unshakable. People are drawn to that, not because you have all the answers, but because you've learned how to trust when there are none. That is what makes your prayer life magnetic. People feel safe in your presence because your faith creates a refuge. Your peace becomes a shelter. Your quiet confidence invites them to rest. And that, my friend, is the beginning of transformation for others. You may not even realize the impact your prayers are having. Some of your most powerful moments with God have no audience but heaven. Yet those moments shape who you are becoming. And who you are becoming will draw multitudes more than anything you try to perform. They will come because they are hungry, not for entertainment, but for the presence of someone who knows how to touch heaven. Prayer is not about showing your strength. It's about revealing your dependence. Faith in prayer isn't about pretending you're okay. It's about believing that God is with you even when you're not. That transparency is what people need. That vulnerability, that faith that says, even if I don't see it yet, I still believe, becomes the lighthouse for those lost in the dark. And when others see you pray like that, unshaken, undistracted, unrelenting, they begin to wonder what you know that they don't. They become curious about the God who holds you together. They lean in to hear the whisper that steadies your heart. That's when the door opens. That's when their hearts begin to turn, not to you. Because at the heart of it all, faith in prayer is not about getting God to act. It's about becoming someone who trusts, even when he seems silent. That kind of faith is rare. That kind of faith is powerful. That kind of faith draws people. Not because you seek attention, but because you found peace. So keep praying, keep believing, even if no one sees you, even if you feel small, even if you're still waiting. Your faith is not invisible to God, and it won't remain invisible to the world. In time, your life will speak, your prayers will bear fruit, and the multitudes will come not because of your voice, but because of the presence you've cultivated in prayer. Through unwavering faith, there is something profoundly irresistible about genuine love. Not the love that is spoken only in words, but the love that radiates from the soul. The kind that can be felt in silence, seen in a gesture, and sensed in a presence. This is the kind of love that pours out of a life anchored in deep prayer. It is not self-produced. It is divine, birthed in communion with the heart of God. When someone spends time in real prayer, not just out of duty but out of desire, their soul becomes saturated with the very nature of God, because God is love. You cannot enter into his presence consistently and not be changed by his essence. And the more time you spend in that sacred space, the more your heart begins to beat with his rhythm. You no longer love people out of obligation. You love them because it becomes your nature. Prayer is where compassion is born. It is in prayer that you begin to see people through the eyes of grace instead of judgment. It is in prayer that your heart softens toward the broken, the forgotten, and even the difficult. That inner transformation becomes visible to the world. It's not something you try to do. It becomes who you are. And that love, so rare, so pure, is what draws multitudes. People are not looking for perfection. They are starving for love that doesn't have conditions. They are searching for someone who will see them not just as they are, but as they were created to be. When you pray, your eyes change. You begin to see not just the surface, but the soul. And that gaze, filled with compassion, truth, and hope, can begin the healing in another's life. You don't have to be eloquent to move someone's heart. You just have to love them with the love of God. And that love is developed in the quiet place. It is in the tears cried alone in prayer, in the whispers of surrender, in the quiet yes to God's will. That's where love deepens. It's where your heart is cleansed of pride, bitterness, and selfishness. And when you rise from that place, you carry something that the world cannot replicate. People come to Jesus not because of clever words, but because of encounters with real love. The love that listens without interrupting. The love that speaks truth without condemnation. The love that reaches out even when it's not returned. That kind of love shakes people to the core because it reflects the unconditional, pursuing heart of God. And here's what's powerful. Love created in prayer is not limited by your emotions or circumstances. It goes deeper than human affection. It flows even when you're tired. It remains even when you've been hurt, because it's not sourced in you. It's sustained by God. That's why you can keep loving when others stop. That's why you can keep loving when others hold on to offense. That's why you can embrace the outcast and welcome the prodigal home. The multitudes aren't coming for noise. They're not coming for performance. They're coming for presence. God's presence. And that presence is most evident where real love flows. Your prayers make you a vessel of that love. You begin to walk differently, talk differently, and respond differently. Not because you're trying, but because love has reshaped you. And when people encounter that love in you, they feel safe. They feel seen. They feel drawn. Not to your personality, but to the presence that surrounds you. And that's when the door opens for transformation, not by pressure, but by invitation, not by arguments, but by kindness. You become a living testimony of what it means to be loved by God, and others want to experience that for themselves. That's the hidden power in prayer. It fills you with a love that is tangible. It makes you a mirror reflecting heaven on earth. The miracles, the salvations, the revival, they don't begin with events. They begin with hearts saturated in divine love. They begin in prayer closets, in whispered intercessions, in tear-stained Bibles, and they overflow from those sacred places into streets, homes, churches. You may not always see the immediate results, but when you pray with love, you plant seeds that heaven waters. You may never know who was healed just because you smiled with grace. You may never see the full story of how one act of compassion turned a heart toward God. But love never goes unnoticed by heaven, and it never returns empty. So pray until love fills every crevice of your soul. Pray until your heart breaks for what breaks His. Pray until your presence speaks of Jesus before your mouth ever does. Because in the end, it is love that draws the multitudes, and it is prayer that births that love. There are moments when the air becomes heavy with something unexplainable, when a hush settles over a room not out of silence, but out of reverence. It is in these moments that the invisible becomes undeniable, when the atmosphere carries the weight of heaven itself. This is not hype, not performance, not manipulation. It is what happens when sincere, faith-filled prayer invites the tangible presence of God into our midst. The atmosphere of prayer is not limited by walls or stages. It doesn't require stained glass or sound systems. It can descend in a hospital room, in a kitchen, in a humble gathering of 2 or 3 souls who dare to believe. It arrives when people are desperate enough to stop talking and start seeking. It comes when there is hunger, not for spectacle, but for the sacred. And when that presence manifests, no one remains the same. When a room is filled with the presence of God, even those far from Him begin to feel something shift in their hearts. The hard begin to soften, the broken begin to hope. The skeptical grow quiet, unsure why they're crying without knowing why. That's the hidden power in prayer. It creates an atmosphere that bypasses intellect and speaks straight to the soul. In that holy atmosphere, burdens lift without a word, hearts open without explanation. People sense a love they've never known, a peace they've never tasted, and it all begins with prayer. Not just any prayer, but deep, surrendered, reverent communion with the Almighty. It's not about eloquence, it's about intimacy. It's not about formality, it's about honesty. When people begin to pray with sincerity, heaven responds, and earth is never the same. This is what draws multitudes. Not the lighting, not the music, not even the sermon, but the undeniable feeling that something divine is present. People might not be able to describe it, but they know they've touched something real. The atmosphere of prayer makes space for God to move freely without resistance. It says, "We are not here for a show. We are here for you." And God comes. Again and again He comes. Not to the proud, not to the polished, but to the desperate, the humble, the expectant. It is prayer that creates that expectancy. Prayer that lays the foundation. Prayer that opens the heavens and invites the supernatural into the natural. Prayer that says, "Not my will, but yours be done." And when a group of people begin to pray like that, together, with one heart, one hunger, something breaks open in the spirit. You see, the atmosphere of prayer is contagious. When one person begins to pray with fervency and authenticity, others begin to catch it. It's like fire. When it's real, it spreads. Not by force, but by its nature. People begin to weep without understanding why. They feel seen, known, loved. That's not emotion. That's encounter. That's God revealing Himself through the atmosphere created by prayer. This is why multitudes came, not just for healing of the body, but for healing of the soul. They came because in that sacred space created by prayer, their pain was acknowledged, their tears were valid, and their hope was rekindled. They walked in empty and walked out full, not because someone touched them, but because heaven did. This is the power we've forgotten in a world obsessed with productivity, but heaven still waits. The Spirit still broods over those who wait in stillness. And the call today is simple. Return to that sacred atmosphere, create it again. Not just in churches, but in homes, cars, coffee shops, wherever a soul dares to pray with honesty. Because when we pray like that, the presence returns. And when his presence comes, everything changes. The atmosphere becomes pregnant with possibility. Miracles become normal. Hardened hearts melt. Addictions break. Depression lifts. Fear flees. Because where God is, no darkness can remain. And all of it, every drop of it, starts with prayer. Not loud prayer, not perfect prayer. Just honest, surrendered, spirit-filled prayer that says, God, we need you. That one cry has shaken nations. That one cry has broken chains. That one cry has drawn multitudes for centuries. Because it is not the voice that moves people. It is the presence behind the voice. So create the atmosphere. Guard it. Fight for it. Protect the sacred space in your life where God can move without distraction. It may feel invisible, but its fruit is undeniable. The multitudes will come, not because you invited them, but because the atmosphere pulled them in. And they will not leave the same, not because of you, but because of Him. That's the hidden power in prayer, not in what you say, but in what you carry. And what you carry out of the presence. That is the mystery. That is the miracle. That is the call. Don't leave this moment the same. Return to your quiet place. Not to repeat words, but to meet God. There is a hidden power in prayer, and it's waiting right now for the one who dares to believe again. Will it be you?